Hello, dear listener. Episode 437 of the Iron Fist and the Velvet Glove podcast, where we talk about news and politics and sex and religion. I'm Trevor. On the screen there, the regional slumlord of, the slumlord of regional Queensland, Scott. How are you?
Good, thanks, Trevor. Yourself?
I'm well. And Joe, the tech guy, how are you?
Evening all.
Joe, you've got a task first up, is to explain what happened with that whole incident on the internet, but we'll get to that in a moment. If you're in the chat room, say hello. I'm going to put the chat up on my screen so I can see that. Yes, well, of course, we're going to talk about Biden pulling out of the race, and I've got various clips by various just crazy Americans. So, Scott, there's not a lot happening in local Australian politics, is there? So I know we could be accused of just running a pretty USA-centric podcast episode on this occasion, but there's just not much really happening.
Not a hell of a lot's happening, no.
No. So it's not every day that a sitting president pulls out of the race right at the death. So
You did see that meme I sent you?
which one was that, Joe?
Nation with increasingly limited access to birth control thanks man for pulling out.
Yeah, I did see, yes. Thank you for that, Joe. So before we get into that sort of stuff, Joe, CrowdStrike. What happened?
CrowdStrike.
Yeah, what happened?
All right, so it's an advanced antivirus program. It's a corporate antivirus program, amongst other things. And it phones home for updates, and it also reports everything that's going on your computer, so that corporate IT can have an idea of dodgy behavior going around the corporation. Because it's an antivirus program and it's looking for abnormal behavior, it hooks very deeply into the operating system.
It's got a lot of permissions.
It's got a lot of permissions. It's deep inside, and it's loaded immediately upon boot up. So what happened was an update was pushed out by CrowdStrike to the Falcon sensor, and it looks like it was a corrupt file, which when it loaded up caused the program to crash, but that took down the whole operating system. And because it's an initial loaded program, even though they rolled back, once they figured out what was going on, they rolled back the software update, the file update. The affected computers couldn't actually be booted up long enough to contact the internet to download the new file. And even worse, if you had an encrypted hard drive, you couldn't boot into recovery mode to delete the dodgy file to get it back up and running. So you have to then find your secret key for each individual computer, go around each individual computer in turn, boot them into safe mode with the recovery key, and then roll back the software update.
Yep. So some organisations with literally thousands of computers had to physically, manually reboot, and somebody stand there and catch it at a stage and get that initial thing out of there so it could then boot up properly.
So the real big question is, most corporations have learned through painful experience that you don't roll out software updates as soon as they come out. You test them on a limited subset of computers. Now, obviously, antivirus, you want the latest updates as soon as possible because bad people out there are doing bad things. And people just... CrowdStrike are running on 60% of the Fortune 500, Fortune 1000 enterprises. So they've captured a large section of the market. And this was their way of doing business. And the question is, why was this update pushed out on a Thursday night, and why hadn't it been properly tested? Because the fact that it brought down so many computers so quickly means that it hadn't been adequately tested.
Interesting, showing how vulnerable our society is.
Oh, absolutely.
With something as simple as that. Just
and you know,
brings things crashing down.
it only affected Windows. There was a kind of schadenfreude from people who run Linux and Macs, but really no big crowing about it, because realistically,
Could have happened to them.
any operating system can be affected. And again, the same with the antivirus providers. It's easy enough to say, oh, it had never happened to us. But, you know, until you're absolutely sure that your processes are up to spec, and in the security field, a lot of people have been going, yeah, people test for compliance rather than testing for or planning for what happens when it all goes wrong.
I was listening to this podcast with this guy who's an IT guy. There's a podcast about something completely different, a bit like this one, where they're just guy happens to be an IT guy. And he was saying that they try and encourage all of their staff to switch off their computers when they leave at the end of the day. And one of the ideas is that if something like this happens at midnight, then you don't have to fix. You sort of cut it off at the pass, and in the morning quickly make sure people don't reboot their computers until the danger is past. So, is that good practice, Joe? Turn your computer off.
I mean, saving electricity for a start.
Right.
I mean, hopefully your IT is better than just relying on updates overnight. It looks like Trevor's lost his audio again.
It does. Yeah, I was wondering what happened with that.
Yeah, there was a number of comments that were saying things like, well, of course, you know, the best form of antivirus is for you not to be online. So obviously they fulfilled that purpose. You can't get a virus if you're not online to get it.
Very true.
Yeah. I think a lot of people, I mean, obviously, CrowdStrike are going to get absolutely hammered by their customers just for the cost of rebuilding all these computers or fixing all these computers. Yeah, think of the overtime bill and the loss of business for a lot of customers. We were lucky because we were going into Friday afternoon. I think the US, who were just coming into Friday morning, would have had a full day of outage and therefore a much bigger impact for them. No, we can't hear you. Oh, hang on, you're on mute. There you go.
Yeah. Speaking of crazy tech things, I just don't know why this thing does it when in this Restream podcast. Anyway, hopefully it's only the one time. There's another mystery, internet mystery. Right. Okay. Was that everything on the CrowdStrike that would be relevant?
There was one other thing. I'm just trying to... You mentioned something, but I can't remember off the top of my head.
Okay. Might come back to it. Scott. The whole Joe Biden pulling out of the race. And
I think he had to do it.
Yes. And we were sort of arguing before we came to air. Not arguing, but I was saying, like, it just doesn't matter if Kamala Harris gets in. She'll just continue what Joe Biden would have done. And Trump is going to continue a lot of the same things. Does it really make any difference?
Yeah, it does, because, you know, Trump is going to turn his back on world trade and everything else. Now, I know you've got some issues with that, but the worldwide...
Biden's already doing that. Kamala Harris will do that when it comes to China and chips.
With China and chips and everything else, they're doing that. They've got their reasons for that. I don't actually subscribe to their reasons, but they do have their reasons for that.
So there's no difference there.
No, okay. Well, that's one thing, that there's no difference there. Now, there would be a hell of a difference for bodily autonomy in the United States. If you actually had a situation that Trump could get another term in, and if he could actually do what Project 2025 actually calls for, then you'd end up with a blanket ban on abortion across the whole country, which would then result in people going south of the border or north of the border to have a termination done.
But isn't it a state issue?
It's a state issue now.
Mm.
However, the Yanks have actually talked about. There have been some lunatic on the lunatic right that have actually talked about having a national ban on abortions.
Mm.
They're actually talking about having a law in the federal arena that would actually supersede anything on the states would have.
If the Supreme Court could rule that a fetus was a living human being,
They would.
no, but so if a case made it as far as the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court ruled that a fetus was a human being, then federal laws, state laws against murder would automatically kick in.
Exactly.
Okay, I'll grant you there may be some minor differences on.
I don't think they're minor differences.
Well,
I think they're
exactly.
major
Well,
differences.
effectively they're minor because even
I
if
wouldn't call that
even if-
minor. That is something that you cannot possibly call a minor difference. It is a major difference.
these are
And
bedroom
yet-
issues, this is culture war stuff.
It's a bedroom issue. However, it has actually been done now. Roe v. Wade is now on the ash heap of history.
Yes, that's
And that is ridiculous because you've got 6 or 7 states in the US that have actually had their trigger laws have now kicked in, and they've actually gone to this ridiculous stage saying you can't abort if it's after 5 weeks. And then if you got that, most women don't even know they're knocked up until 8 or 12 weeks or something like that. So it's too late for them to get a legal abortion. So they're going to cross the border over into California. You've had some of those right-wing nutjob AGs in those southern states actually speaking out loud, saying the quiet bit out loud, and they're saying that they're going to prosecute women that leave the state to have a termination.
Here's what I'm saying. Here's what I'm saying. There's going to be no difference. Is say Kamala Harris gets in, Roe v. Wade's there. There's going to be states, redneck states, that are maintaining their abortion bans, and she won't be able to do anything about it. Really.
Well, I agree that it's going to be pretty hard for her to do something about it unless she's got congressional.
So for
support.
starters, she's going to have to get a majority of the Congress.
Yeah.
And then pass a federal law, which will then be challenged in courts that are dominated by Republican appointees who are not going to like the federal law and are going to be
AOC is trying
upholding
to
states'
impeach
rights.
2 of the Supreme Court justices.
What's that, Joe? Sorry.
AOC is trying to impeach 2 of the Supreme Court justices.
Yeah.
So if they go, or
big ifs. Like,
no, but yours were
ifs.
big ifs as well.
So Alison in the chat room went, Trevor, exclamation mark.
And I don't blame
Alison,
her.
I'm not saying that bedroom issues aren't a big deal. I'm saying the difference that will effectively happen isn't going to happen. The abortion rock show is going to continue exactly the same way it has, and Kamala Harris won't be able to do anything about it. That's my point, is that there's no effective difference is going to result from her election, even though, yes, they want to fix that issue, but it just won't happen.
Well, but even if she can't make it any better, at least she can stop it getting worse, which is the suspicion that will happen under Trump.
Well, if every state becomes just more and more redneck, then what can she do about it?
Well, I think she could actually try. She could actually try and have a federal law that would get
and try and run it through this Supreme Court.
Yeah, okay, you've got that, but that Supreme Court is only temporary.
So I grant you there'll be a difference.
If the justices die, she gets to appoint more Supreme Court justices.
Well, she gets to nominate them. They're
Well,
only
yeah.
You know
appointed by
what?
the
They
Senate.
won't let her. The Republicans won't. They will stall a Supreme Court appointment for 4 years.
But hang on, don't forget the Supreme Court has ruled that she can, within her remit as president, do anything that a president can do with no criminal charges.
She could assassinate some of them.
She could assassinate whoever she wants.
Yeah. Okay, so there's going to be an argument over abortion, but it's going to be just an argument that's not going to make any effective change. That's what I'm saying. What
then
else
we've
is what else
then
was
we've
going to be
also-
different? If
We've
Kamala
also
Harris
got the other thing too about that Supreme Court justice that waxed lyrically and all that sort of stuff, and he says, "Well, maybe we should revisit the gay marriage thing."
yes,
You know, and that is something that I honestly believe they could actually take off if they got their opportunity to.
and if it rolls off to the Supreme Court and the Supreme Court makes that decision again,
Yeah,
she won't
and
be able to
that's-
do anything about it.
Well, she could actually have some sort of marriage law act in the federal government.
Which will then roll through the courts, end up at the Supreme Court, and be told, for some whatever crazy reason, you can't do it.
Anyway, I just think that there are people like yourself that are making light of Trump possibly coming back.
No, I'm not making light of it.
Well, I think you are
I'm-
because you're actually quite excited about AUKUS being knocked on the head, which
Yeah,
I agree
yeah,
with.
but that's a big issue.
AUKUS is a big issue, and it should be knocked on the head. However, there are other things going along there that would suffer, that would make the American people suffer more under a Trump presidency than they would under a Harris presidency.
Like what? Like, I'm not excited by a Trump presidency.
Good
Scott.
Lord, I think you are.
Only from the point of view that I think it will most likely lead to AUKUS being officially cancelled before it's eventually cancelled in 10 years' time. That doesn't make me excited about or wanting Trump. But we're just kidding ourselves. This is so performative, where the way that the US conducts itself in foreign relations and military affairs, and also just its own people, it's still going to continue.
But no, I mean,
They're singing from the same song sheet, these people.
Trump handed Afghanistan back to the Taliban. He was quite happy about that.
Well, hang on, wasn't it Biden who pulled out of Afghanistan?
No,
Didn't they
Trump
criticise
actually-
Biden for
They
doing
did.
it too
They
quickly?
did, but Trump was the one.
but
that
Trump had
started
signed the agreement with the Taliban, and Trump had said we're pulling these troops out by this date. So
Right.
Biden had to do that.
Right. So, what are you saying?
So what I'm saying is, there is a difference between them, and
Well, they both. I mean, if Biden wanted to, he could have said, "I've changed my mind. We're staying in Afghanistan." They
But
both
I think-
wanted to at that point.
I think by that time, that if they changed their mind, the infrastructure wasn't in place. They'd pulled back enough of the infrastructure to make it very difficult for them to stay.
Look,
I
there'll be
mean,
one
the
difference
Taliban, I think the Taliban was already moving across the country by the time.
in foreign
it's going to
policy.
happen.
There will be a difference. Trump will pull out of
The
assisting.
Paris Accord.
Will pull out of assisting Ukraine.
Yes.
So Ukraine will be forced to enter into a negotiated peace with Russia.
You
That's-
Which will
mean-
end up, which will end up with
Another state like Belarus.
So, so that would be one difference in foreign policy. But
Yes.
what's going on in Gaza, the support of Israel and what's going on there, the expansion of NATO into encircling China if it can.
No. He's not into that at all. He doesn't want. He doesn't like NATO.
Actually, you might be right there. Well,
He's actually
yes, he might actually
he's
pare that
actually
back.
said-
You're
he's
quite
actually
right.
said to NATO members that unless they pay 2% of their GDP into
Hmm.
their defence, then I think he said, well, I would encourage the Russians to do whatever the hell they want to you.
You know what? We've just decided amongst us that he's got to probably cause a peace in the Ukraine and pull NATO back from
not
China.
peace in
And
the
maybe I am
Ukraine.
starting to get excited.
It's
Maybe
not peace in the Ukraine at all. It would be a bloody disaster. It's
And
one
also-
of those things. If the Ukraine,
more of a disaster than what's happening now.
if they were forced to negotiate with that bastard Putin,
Mm-hmm.
all he would do is slice up the country bit by bit, and he'd go back in, he'd go cross beyond his border, lick his wounds, rebuild his troops, go back in for another bite until the whole bloody country was absorbed as part of Russia.
More of a disaster than what's happening now.
Yes.
Millions of lives being lost? No, there would be less lives being lost. However, it's not, you can't just roll your eyes and say that's not a bad idea. It's one of those things. It's something that you cannot just say.
Yeah. If only the Allies during the 1940s had just rolled over when Hitler wanted the whole of Europe,
Yeah.
less lives would have been lost.
Do you reckon the surviving Ukrainians agree with me or you?
I would say that a lot of the surviving Ukrainians want Russia out. They don't like life under Russian rule.
Do you reckon a fair number of them would agree with me?
Possibly.
A small number would.
Yeah.
What if it is? What if it is a majority of the Ukrainians agree with me?
If
What
it's
then?
a majority of Ukrainians agree with you, then that would
Then
be
they'd
fine.
vote-
It would show. It would.
Zelensky
it would-
out.
They're not allowed to vote. He's cancelled the election. Says he can't run one.
because he's being invaded by a foreign country.
Yeah.
I know the Russians like the Russians.
Because his democracy is under threat. I mean,
Because
this is
I
the
know
thing.
I know the
It might
Russians
well be
like
the case if he had an election, everyone would boot him out because they've had enough of it. They want their remaining men to live.
potentially, and if that is the result of the Ukrainian election, you have to stand by it.
We won't know. You won't hold one.
Well, we'll have to wait and see.
I know people who definitely would rather be at war than be under Putin.
Yeah. And I'm sure there would be people with the opposite view. We just
Yeah,
have
sure.
no idea of the percentages or whatever.
Yeah. I look in the UK.
And anyway, who
that-
cares what people think? Democracies get things wrong anyway.
Exactly.
I cannot believe that you're turning your
And
back on democracy.
President for life Trump, who's been eyeing up Mugabe's reign of power.
Has he been applauding Mugabe? Has he?
No, he hasn't, but
Oh.
I'm sure he would. If he'd ever heard of Mugabe, I'm sure he'd be, he's a strong man.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you honestly think if Trump gets into power, he will leave at the end of 4 years?
I have. No, I don't know what he would do. I have no idea.
I think he would
probably
actually want
not.
to stay on.
I think he would probably try and install his son or daughter or something like that. So I think he'd try and do something like that.
I mean, the way he was cozying up to Kim, I think he would very much like the USA to be his own private North Korea.
Yeah. Just
And that really wouldn't surprise me because, North Korea's locked itself off from the rest of the planet.
well, quite possible. Quite possible.
I just think he's an idiot. That's all. And I cannot believe that anyone would be actually applauding him coming back to office.
Yeah. Well, it looks like a majority of Americans are.
Well, that's very true. And I just
No,
don't
I don't think it's
understand
going to
it.
be a majority of Americans. It never has been a majority of
Okay.
Americans.
And a majority of the, what's it called?
The Electoral Council? No.
Yeah.
The Electoral College. Yeah.
Electoral College, yes. Looks like enough of them will. Which is close enough. It's huge numbers anyway. But, yeah. John Simmons is in the chat room. He's 30 minutes behind, catching up.
Right.
Well, he's not going to be able to catch up that conversation, is he?
Wow, that was a good old-fashioned argument there.
Yeah.
Let's have some
It
more of
was
that.
because you're wrong.
No, it wasn't.
What part am I wrong again?
You're wrong about the United States. You're wrong about
What part about the United States was I wrong?
Well, you actually honestly believe that it doesn't really matter which side wins.
Were you here for the full 10-minute argument?
Yeah. That's true. I think for the most part, it doesn't matter. I
Now-
think that the rock show will continue pretty much as it has, except for the Ukraine and probably defunding of NATO, keeping them out of threatening China. But otherwise,
I don't think.
the sorts of things that affect most people, other than some culture war issues.
Which are very big
think
issues.
Kamala Harris will be the best right-wing government president they've had since Obama.
She will be the what?
The best right-wing president they'll have had since Obama.
Right. So you're agreeing with me in the sense that the economy and the running of the economy isn't going to change.
Well, the choice is right or far right.
Yeah.
There is no left wing in American politics.
Yeah. An extractive capitalism that favours the 1%
Yes.
run by Donald Trump, or the same thing run by Kamala Harris.
Well, a slightly less bad. There is a difference. It's not great.
Yeah. Arguably, I was listening to something about it was the donors pulling out of funding for the Democrats that was one of the driving forces for them getting onto Biden and saying, you've got to pull out. So,
Did
that
you
doesn't
see
surprise me.
Trump in the one paragraph going on about how great Elon Musk was and how we ought to make life easy for Elon Musk?
right.
And then the next breath saying, he gives me $45 million a month, was it? It was some stupid amount of money into his super PAC.
Right.
Literally in the same paragraph, he was saying,
He's a
"We
great
should give
guy.
this
And by the
tax
way, he's a big
breaks."
donor.
And he's a big donor of mine.
Yeah, which is absolutely
Shameless.
crazy because it was only 10 minutes earlier that he was blasting electric vehicles.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you know, he was there to drain the swamp, remember?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, anyway, I like what Caitlin Johnston had to say, basically, that the rock show is going to be run the same way. She put it this way. Every few years, the US Empire has this weird little festival where it pretends the government is changing hands and will now begin operating in a way that is meaningfully different from the way it was operating before. And she says, the elections themselves are a performative ritual put on to help people feel good about themselves, like a religious sacrament performed by a priest. You guys disagree, but that's good. Yeah. Anyway, we can't be sure.
Well,
it's
see,
gonna
I think that Caitlin Johnson probably lives in California or somewhere like that.
she lives in
where she-
Melbourne.
Just,
Well,
Yeah.
she lives in Melbourne, does she? Okay. Well, she doesn't have to worry about the sort of nonsense that is being considered by the Supreme Court. She doesn't have to worry about paying a fortune for her drugs or anything else.
Mm.
You know, it's crazy that the Yanks do not have insulin at an affordable price.
And what did Biden do about that?
Well, he did actually lower the price of insulin.
Right. Okay. So they do have insulin at a good price.
It's a better price. It's not as cheap as it is in Australia, but it is a better price than what it was.
Right. Yeah.
See, it's utterly crazy that, anyway, we can talk about the American healthcare system if you wanted to, but it's one of those things. I just don't understand why the Yanks have got this, look at me, I pay for my own healthcare. Well, big deal. You know, you're a fucking idiot.
Yeah. Well, attaching it to as part of your work package, remuneration package, is a disastrous idea. So, yeah. Anyway, will Kamala Harris get the nod? There'll be a Democratic
Potentially
National
not.
Convention. Yeah. What's
Yeah,
your theory
it's-
on that one, Scott?
Well, I mean, I think that she probably will get the nod because Biden's delegates and everything are there. They're probably going to be more inclined to actually vote the way he wants them to.
Mhm.
So he wants them to vote for Kamala Harris. So I
my
imagine
thought
they're
is,
gonna vote.
she's a black woman. Is she going to get the support of America? I mean, you're going to get the misogynistic racists out of the woodworks anyway.
Yeah, exactly. They'll be
But
everywhere.
are you going to get enough people who would support her, or are they going to be enough
Well,
of the
they voted for
fence?
They voted for Obama, so voted
They
for a
did,
black man
but he was a
before.
man.
Yes. So,
Yeah, but he might have been a man and everything else, but he was also a black man, and he was a hell of a
Well,
lot
he was
blacker than
no,
what
he was
you think
he was half a black man.
Well, he was half a black man. She was half Indian, half Caribbean,
yeah.
former
she's got-
slave.
Yeah. Grant Clark says she's deeply unpopular.
Oh, that's Landon Hardbottom. Yeah.
Hmm.
I know she's deeply
thought it-
unpopular because she was the AG of she was the AG in California, wasn't she?
She was a
I don't
prosecutor
know.
in
Apparently,
California.
she's very conservative.
So, yeah. Okay. What else have I got here? So, yeah, we'll find out Democratic National Convention on the 19th of August. Read an article in the Courier Fail which said one of the reasons why it took so long to get Biden to quit, of course, it seemed, was his wife. And apparently she hates Kamala Harris because
Oh, really?
as part of a debate they were having in 2019, Kamala Harris suggested Biden was a racist for opposing busing used to desegregate schools. So because Harris suggested Biden was a racist, Biden's wife has hated Kamala Harris ever since. And one of the reasons why she resisted so long and encouraged her husband to keep going was because it was probably likely that Harris would get the nod. She really didn't want that. So that is according to an article in the Courier Mail. So take that with a grain of salt. You know, this would have been, let me see, according to insiders, which could it could mean anybody. Yeah. Right. Well, Trump announced a vice presidential running mate, and just a reminder that the reason he had to pick a new VP is because his own supporters tried to kill his last one.
Yes. Who was also a theocrat.
Yes. So this time we've got this guy, J.D. Vance.
Yep.
Let's have a bit of a listen to him. Break things up with a bit of a clip here.
I think in this movement of national conservatism, what we need more than inspiration is we need wisdom. And there was a wisdom in what Richard Nixon said approximately 40, 50 years ago. He said, and I quote, "The professors are the enemy."
There you go.
Cultural revolution.
What's that, Joe?
Cultural revolution.
Yeah.
Yeah, like the Chinese did. Just take them out and kill them.
Yeah. Won't even bother re-educating them.
Yeah.
Yeah. I did a quick Google search. What did Nixon actually say? Apparently this comes from tapes that were recovered. He said, never forget, he tells National Security Advisors Henry Kissinger and Alexander Haig in a conversation December 14th, 1972. This is Nixon. Never forget, the press is the enemy. The press is the enemy. The establishment is the enemy. The professors are the enemy. The professors are the enemy. Write that on a blackboard 100 times. That's what Nixon said. I don't know why Vance missed out on the press and the establishment. You know, he remembered the professors, but...
Well, I just think he was trying to make the point about the education system because, you know, he wants to abolish the Department of Education.
Yes. Does he?
Yeah.
But you don't want your workers too educated, otherwise they get ideas.
Yeah. Can't have that. The Republican convention was full of people kissing the ring, most notably Nikki Haley. Here's a little bit of her.
Donald Trump has my strong endorsement, period.
That was
Donald Trump has my strong endorsement, period.
That was Nikki Haley on the convention floor last night. And here's a reminder of what she used to sound like just 4 short months ago.
Of course, many of the same politicians who now publicly embrace Trump privately dread him. They know what a disaster he's been and will continue to be for our party. They're just too afraid to say it out loud. Well, I'm not afraid to say the hard truths out loud. I feel no need to kiss the ring.
Well, she didn't then. 4 months later, she felt the need to kiss the ring.
Where's her sticking plaster?
Yes, for those unaware, people at the Republican convention were wearing big wad of sticking of sort of a bandage on their left ear, right ear, as support for Donald Trump, who was wearing a very oversized bandage on his ear. So, yeah, the supporters were just wearing that. Did you not see that, Scott?
Yeah, I did see it. That was ridiculous that he had such a huge bandage and everything over on his ear, because the whole thing was it was just a was just a little nick, yes, with an AR-15, which, yes, would have been fatal had it have been quarter of an inch over. But, it's just ridiculous that he actually wore something like that. And then you had this other situation that people were cutting up sanitary napkins and that sort of stuff to just tape them to their ears so they could look like Donald Trump. It was a joke.
I did see the comment that it's not since Stormy Daniels has have women been so disappointed by 2 inches.
Yeah. So, yeah, shameless. Nikki Haley, just completely shameless. Kari Lake was the governor in Arizona who was disputing that the election was valid. And interesting interview where the interviewer really nails it. This is a great example of an interviewer knowing their stuff, keeping their cool, and being able to just not let go with the interviewee who's just talking shit. So this is a little bit of a longish one, but pay attention to the way that this particular journalist had such a really good grasp of the facts, and I thought conducted this as about as well as you possibly could. So yeah, in the chat room, Mike Tyson, this is from Grant, Mike Tyson bit off a guy's ear off, and he didn't wear as big a bandage as Trump did. All right, here's Kari Lake. Yeah, we'll play some of this.
I actually think you need your head examined.
Can you answer that?
I think you need your head examined.
Donald Trump has talked, Mr. Trump's talked about the need for a new tone in politics, a civility in politics, a kind of unity. What does that mean to you?
I actually think the tone has always been good. I believe that what we're trying to push is a strong economy, secure borders. These are policies everybody wants. And so
you don't think the tone in American politics got out of hand?
I think the tone is really disturbing when the media is calling a man like Donald Trump Hitler. They're comparing him to Hitler.
Like J.D. Vance did.
Like the media is doing. But J.D. Vance was probably, like many Americans, they listen to the media. And for 8 years, the media has been tearing President Trump apart. A good man who everybody loved before he ran. Imagine having a smear campaign going on about you for 8 years.
Yeah.
Pretty soon, everyone wouldn't like you. And so I applaud the fact that people like J.D. Vance and others, we've seen them, Amber Rose, she did a speech. People are coming over going, whoa, the media was lying and I believed it. And it's so irresponsible.
And you falsely claimed that Trump won in 2020. You called for the imprisonment of those who accepted Trump's defeat, including your own opponent in Arizona, Katie Hobbs. Why did you do that?
Called for the imprisonment of what?
Of opponents like Katie Hobbs who accepted Trump's defeat. Why did you falsely claim that Trump won in 2020?
Well, I'm not going to sit here and go through all of the evidence of what happened. Do you believe Joe Biden won 81 million votes? Do you think he's more popular? A guy who can't string two sentences together. You believe he's more popular than Barack Obama? I'm asking you, do you believe that he is the most popular president in the history? You have to have you got to have brain cells.
Okay, so you don't believe that Joe Biden won the election in 2020?
I believe the election was run fraudulently.
And you refused to concede in 2022 as well, your own contest.
Well,
you filed
obviously you're sitting
lawsuits.
across the pond and you don't understand what's happened. And I'm not going to argue about it with somebody.
You were sued for defamation.
Yeah, because this is how corrupt the system.
It goes on, but we probably can't play it all.
So because Biden got more votes than Obama did, therefore it's fraud. It couldn't be that people were worried about Trump getting back in and therefore turned out in droves to vote for Biden whether they liked him or not.
I think there was a hell of a lot in that because you did have a higher turnout.
Yeah, absolutely.
People had actually seen what the Trump presidency was like and they didn't want a repeat of it.
Anyway, good work by the interviewer there, and the rest of that interview, she nails her, but it's probably a little bit too long for this. A little bit of just crazy American stuff. Article from the New York Times, so it must be true. In Las Vegas and surrounding communities, more than 97 970,000 feet of electrical wiring, that's the equivalent of 184 miles, have gone missing from street lights over the past 2 years. The lights are going out across American cities as a result of a brazen and opportunistic type of crime. Thieves have been stripping copper wire out of thousands of streetlights and selling it to scrap metal recyclers for cash. Oh, there's a good sign of the
I
decline of
have
the
actually
empire.
heard that, I think in the UK,
Right.
that it was public parks. They've been pulling up the cable to steel, going to light poles in the parks.
Right. Yeah.
But that's under 14 years of Conservative government rather than under 2 years of Joe Biden. I think people are doing it tough all over the world.
Yes, that is doing it tough. I haven't heard of that in Australia yet, of people pulling up public wiring in.
No, they don't. They only steal if it hasn't actually been. If it hasn't been.
Yes.
If it hasn't been used as yet.
Yes.
So they do have a problem with the cables and that sort of stuff going missing from the yards and whatnot of
Right, yes.
and Energex. So stuff will go missing from there. And if you also one of the more security conscious builders and everything up here is actually really worried about their job sites until they can get them secure, because the copper pipes and everything are going missing. So people do actually knock that sort of stuff off.
You know, when they have the sort of street dump thing where you put your rubbish out on the footpath to get collected, if you put it at an appliance with an electric cord, and people come along and snip the cord and leave the appliance behind.
Oh, do they?
Right.
Yes, that happens.
I remember talking to a telecoms guy who'd been in Africa and was saying, they had such a problem with people digging up the phone lines for the copper. When fibre came in, they went, great, we won't have this problem anymore. And a couple of weeks later, the fibre optics had been dug up and turned into a table lamp.
Landon Hardbottom says, thanks for the side hustle idea, Fist.
I can't imagine Landon actually getting out and doing it himself.
Yeah.
Right.
He'd probably pay minions to do it.
Yeah. Liz Truss, former British PM, and now very pro-Republican, has been hanging around that convention and making speeches.
Oh, Nigel Farage has gone over there as well.
Yes.
He was going to go and become Trump's aide or something, wasn't he?
Yes. But that's Nigel Farage. We've got Liz
But
Truss,
he's-
a former British Prime Minister.
Well, she's just as nutty.
Yeah, I know,
Yes.
but
Remember, she
Nigel-
wanted
isn't
to take the
Nigel-
British. She tanked the British economy in 40 days.
Yeah. Isn't Nigel Farage an MP in the British government?
He is now an MP.
Yeah, he's not in the British government, but anyway, he is an MP in British Parliament.
Yeah.
Anyway, this is what the UK is missing out on with Liz Truss not in power anymore.
I have to confess, I've never been to Pennsylvania, but I do have in my possession a Liberty. I have to confess, I've never been to Pennsylvania, but I do have in my possession a Liberty Bell showerhead, which is an exact replica of the showerhead that President Reagan has in his ranch in California, which I recently visited. And I will be proudly installing this showerhead as a symbol of liberty and democracy and, of course, Pennsylvania. Because you all know why you're so important, which is this is a crucial state in order for President Trump to be reinstalled in the White House.
Yeah, she was a nut.
Yes.
There you go, Landon. There's another idea. Start manufacturing Liberty Bell shower heads. Mate, you are going to clean up if you can make those widely available. Oh, that's the former Prime Minister. Oh, it's so sad that there we go. That's where we've reached. What else have I got here? Yeah, I mean, we could make fun of Americans and crazy people all day, which we will continue to do. This one coming up is, what have I got here? It's Donald Jr.'s girlfriend, Kimberly Guilfoyle. She gets to make speeches at this convention.
Oh, good God.
Hers was a cracker. I'll play some of hers. Here we go.
It is no wonder that the heroes who stormed the beaches of Normandy and faced down communism sadly say they don't recognize our country anymore. This is not...
There you go. Stormed Normandy to face down communism.
Yeah, no. Well, they did face down communists once they got to the river in the center of Germany, and they linked hands with them.
Well, yeah, well, that wasn't facing them down, was it?
No, it was facing them. That's all. But
yes. Yeah,
she's had so much Botox in there; it's no longer working. It's fucked up her brain.
Yes.
If you want, for a mere $72.31 from Amazon, you can buy a Liberty Bell shower head.
Are they available already?
Yeah.
There you go. Of course they would be. How much?
Well, that's where she got hers from, I think.
Right. $72.
Yeah. US.
Yeah. Okay.
Plus postage.
Yep.
Well, maybe Landon was ahead of the game after all.
Yeah.
What else have I got here? An old clip of Joe Biden when he still had his marbles. Play this one.
Our conversation with Zganov was repeated with Lebed. They talked about they don't want this NATO expansion. They know it's not in their security interests and on, and said, well, and if you do that, we may have to look to China. And I couldn't help using the colloquial expression from my state by saying to Zganov, lots of luck in your senior year. Good luck. And if that doesn't work, try Iran. I'm serious. I said that to them, and these were, and they know, I knew, they knew, everybody knows that is not an option. And everybody knows, every one of those leaders acknowledges and needs, and they resent it. But they need to look west. And the question is, whether this is designed.
Well, actually, they don't, turns out. So Russia has turned to Iran and China, and it's going quite well for them in terms of their economy. So that just goes to show how the world has changed, that it was just laughable for Russia to consider teaming up with Iran and China as if that would help them in any way. And now, of course, they're completely able to bypass the US system, and times have changed. He was more had more vigour back in the day.
He was younger.
Yeah.
Had more hair.
Yeah. What else have I got here? Shall we talk about the Labor Party and religion?
Yeah, I think so.
So, private schools, Scott.
Yeah, I know.
In the 5 years to 2022, private schools in New South Wales spent an estimated $1.5 billion on capital projects. $1.5 billion. Private schools, New South Wales, 5 years. Building funds, which parents are encouraged to donate to, are given tax-deductible status by the Commonwealth. The Australian Productivity Commission called for these building funds to be stripped of their tax-deductible status in a report. And the response from the Albanese government was swift and unequivocal. Andrew Lee said the proposed changes are not being considered. So there we go. A productivity commission says, here's an idea. Remove a religious privilege. Labor, the first thing it does in response to the report is say, not that particular idea. That's not happening.
It's not necessarily religion. It could be completely a-religious private schools. The point is that private schools are getting funded by the taxpayer in terms of tax breaks. and none of that money is flowing down into the public schools that are underfunded.
Yeah. I
But
guess
either way.
Yes, true. It doesn't have to be religious.
No.
That's true. So, yes, disappointing federal Labor from that point of view. And, well, Scott, we were talking earlier about the difference between, what does it matter whether the Republicans or the Democrats get in? Did it make much difference having Albanese and not having Scott Morrison? Other than stage 3 tax cuts, was there any other issue where we could have said things are different because of Albanese rather than Scott Morrison?
Not really. That's just that's symptomatic of our compulsory voting system and everything over here. It forces both the parties to compete for the centre. So you've got the centre right and the centre left. And that is a preferable system, because you do not have to try and motivate your base by throwing out red meat to the left wing or red meat to the right wing to get them out to vote for you, which is a preferable system. So I honestly believe that because there's not that much difference between the right wing of the Labor Party and the left wing of the Liberal Party, then you've got a position that's going to be fairly much the same regardless of who wins. Now, clearly that was preferable what Albanese did with the stage 3 tax cuts, but that was probably the only real difference between the two parties. And, looking at the religion treatment and that sort of stuff, they're pretty much on a line ball call with that. That was ridiculous. Like, they could have actually said, well, they could have actually said, well, who was it? The Productivity Commission said just scrap it, didn't they?
Yeah.
Yeah, they could have actually used that as cover. They could have said, well, the Productivity Commission told us to remove this, so that's why we're doing it. But they didn't do that.
No.
God knows why.
Yeah. Well, Scott, it's just going to make it easier when you eventually are in that voting booth and you put down a vote for the Greens.
I'm not looking forward to that. I'm not looking forward to it at all.
Just keep that sort of issue in mind as you put that little stroke of the pencil for the number one.
Yeah, don't forget, when you preference the Greens, that tells Labour that you're not happy with their centrist position and you want them further left.
Yeah. That'll feel good, Scott.
We'll have to wait and see.
Locally, no, still federally, Speaker of the House of Representatives, Milton Dick, is set to appear alongside controversial religious figures at an event promoting the influence of conservative Christianity throughout Australia. It's the Raw 24 Leaders Summit in Brisbane in early September.
Are they raw dogging too?
What's that?
I said, are they raw dogging too?
Well, Raw 24. Critics of the event, the Rationalist Society, called the summit an event promoting the Seven Mountains Mandate ideology. There's going to be a bunch of hardcore Christians, and Speaker of the House, Milton Dick, is going to be there. They're just as captured by religion as the rest of them. Finally, here's an interesting one. This might cause more arguments. The CFMEU, they're not so bad, are they?
Okay, go on, give it to us.
This was an article in Crikey.
I read it.
Yeah, Guy Rundle. And what he's essentially saying is that the CFMEU is one of the few unions, or perhaps the only union, that has actually made sure that workers got their share of the money that's flying around. And that
unlike the shoppies
and many other unions, and in this whole sort of debate about the worth or value of the CFMEU, there's very little discussion where people go, we've got guys who are actually earning good money and living good lifestyles as a result of the union on their behalf. So that was sort of Guy Rundle's argument, and he, in the article, also sort of hinting that a lot of the allegations against them are a beat up, and what would you expect from someone like the Fairfax papers? What else can we say that he says here? See if I can find some interesting bits. Yeah, he's kind of saying that in Victoria there was a huge number of big infrastructure projects which big companies were more than willing to get involved in, even though the CFMEU would be controlling the work sites, because they were getting big money from the government, and if it wasn't big enough to cover the expense, they could go back to the government and the government would give them more money to cover the expense. So he's saying that there's all sorts of funny money flying around by the Victorian Labor Party on big ticket infrastructure, and the CFMEU made sure that their members got a fair share of that fat pie that was there, and that other unions haven't done that. So what else did he say here? He's not saying that the leadership are innocent of misdoings, but he's also pointing out that at different times the developers hired bikies to keep the CFMEU out of the picture. And anyway, it was an argument providing sort of a flip side to the narrative that's been put out there about the evil CFMEU, and basically pointing out, yes, but at the end of the day, one of the few unions that's actually got undoubtedly benefits for its members. What do you think of that idea, Scott?
Well,
Joe?
I wondered whether or not there was another side to it, and I still haven't read Crikey. But it's one of those things. Now, Setka's obviously a vile human being. You know, he has been involved in some fairly ghastly thing towards women and that sort of stuff. So, you know, I think that we could all pretty much understand that he's a prick. But I honestly believe that there's probably a fair bit of envy going on down there. Like the other unions might be a bit envious of the CFMEU because they're getting good deals for their workers. You know, I haven't read the article to go through it and that sort of stuff, so I will actually read it now. It doesn't surprise me that someone has actually taken the other side to it and had a look at it. Because, you know, the other thing is it's always just coming out in the right-wing media saying that they're a bunch of bastards and everything else, which you've got to actually think of, well, they can't all be bastards. You know, now Setka's obviously a vile human being, but, you know, that doesn't mean that he didn't have the best interest of his union members at heart. And I'd actually prefer to be part of a more militant union than the one I'm part of. But anyway, it is what it is.
Rundle says, does one really believe that wage theft in bars and restaurants would have been so open, so gluttonous, so cruel and indifferent had hospitality and retail had a major union as militant as the CFMEU?
No, exactly.
Good point.
It's one of those things that I just think that if we could go back to the way it was in the 70s when, you know, yes, it was a pain in the ass because every summer the trolley dollars wouldn't fly. Every winter the power got turned off and the beer wasn't made by Christmas because the unions are actually closing it all down. However, we also had a lot fairer distribution of money and that sort of stuff between workers and the employers back then than what we have now. And honestly believe if you did have some more union militancy out there, just enough to scare the pants off the employers, so that then they had to turn around and actually start giving their workforce a reasonable living, then that would be enough to turn things around. So if we had a few more CFMEUs out there, just to scare the pants off the employers, then it would actually improve. Anyway.
Joe, were you about to say something?
Yeah, I was on an infrastructure bill down in Victoria 15 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And literally as I got on site, I was hit up when I was doing the health and safety by the union rep going, so what's your hourly rate? And, what penalties are you getting?
Mm-hmm.
He wanted to make sure I was getting a fair deal if I was coming on his work site.
Mm-hmm.
And, I'm all for that. I've seen how not all employers, but some employers can screw workers over any way they can. And I think we need strong unions to protect the disparity between the haves and the have-nots at the moment. I think is very much down to an ineffective unions.
Yeah. See, if we had a more unionised workforce, I don't think that they would get away with it as much as they are lately. But it's one of those things. I don't know how you're going to reverse that, because you've got a lot of people in the private sector, and even friends of mine that are miners and that sort of stuff. They're saying they don't want to sign up to the union because they reckon the union's only in it for the money. Well,
have you seen the red unions?
Sorry.
Are you aware of the red unions?
No, who are they?
They are a bunch of new unions that have been set up allegedly by members of the LNP or former members of the LNP.
Okay, gotcha.
So they were very pro-supporting the health workers that were anti-vax. So they're pro-liberty and pro-this and pro-that.
So it's a load of nonsense. Yeah.
So just at the end of this article, Guy Rundle says, through all this, one comes neither to bury John Setka nor to praise him, nor to romanticise any violence that may have arisen. The leadership is a collective, and who did what, good and bad, is as much a mystery to outsiders as is any merry band of brothers. But now is the time to show basic solidarity for a union whose main crime appears to be to have gained, quite possibly, the best deal for manual workers in the history of the world. He goes on, unless one retains the bourgeois illusion that one deserves to be paid more because of having done a degree in semiotics or film noir, still being paid off, the success of the CFMEU should be taken by workers everywhere more as an affirmative lesson, not a warning. Forget the nonsense about lollipop sign holders, etc., etc. Construction remains hard, long and sometimes dangerous work. Good luck to anyone who got a share of the profits out of it by the CFMEU. Solidarity can be built from it, but it is made, not given, by the hard labour of organising. So anyway, I thought it was an interesting sort of flip on the narrative of just a bunch of bullies. And you've got to remember, they've achieved more for their members than any other union in Australia, and through collective solidarity. So good point, Guy Rundle. Quite enjoy reading his stuff. And there we have it, gentlemen. That's a tick over the hour. That was fun. I really enjoyed the argument at the beginning. That was almost 12th man-ish. That was.
I would have thought we probably had a bit different point than what the 12th man would.
Yeah, exactly. We haven't been reading The Spectator.
Yeah, but the style of, a good old-fashioned disagreement. I liked it.
Exactly.
Yeah. Right, gentlemen, you around next week?
Yeah, I'm around.
Good. I'm around. Joe's around. Okay. We'll talk to you then. Bye for now.
And it's a good night.